We already know that within a sentence we must have subject-verb agreement. That is, the subject and verb must match for it to be grammatically correct. We've also focused on singular and plural forms of the subject. So now let's focus on the different forms a verb may take. We'll start by looking at a typical verb, that is, one that follows the normal rules. Let's use the verb walk. We already know that a verb can be written in the present tense or the past tense, so let's add those as headings. So now let's see what form the verb takes when it follows different subjects. So we could say, I walk, and you walk. Or we'd say, he walks, she walks, it walks, or the dog walks. So these are all singular subjects. For plural subjects, it's slightly different. They walk, we walk, you walk, the dogs walk. So, as a general rule, when the subject of a sentence is he, she, or it, or is a singular noun, in this example, the dog, the verb ends in s. For all the other subjects, the verb walk doesn't change. Okay, let's see what happens to the verb in the past tense. We'd say, I walked and you walked. Or we'd say, he walked, she walked, it walked, the dog walked. What about plural subjects? Well, we've got they walked, we walked, you walked, the dogs walked. So this is easy. We can see that in the past tense, ed is simply added to the verb, whatever the subject. So that rule is very easy to remember. Okay, let's look at one more. This time we'll use the verb to guess. Let's start in the present tense. I guess, you guess. He guesses, she guesses, it guesses, the dog guesses. They guess, we guess, you guess, the dogs guess. This time es is added to verbs that follow he, she, it, or a singular noun. The past tense of the verb to guess follows the same rule as the verb to walk. We just add ed. For example, I guessed or it guessed. There's one other verb ending in the present tense to be aware of, and that is verbs that end in a consonant and then a y. An example would be to study. When it's used after he, she, it, or a singular noun, the y becomes I and you add es. For example, he studies. So we now have a general rule. In the present tense, the verb following he, she, it, or a singular noun will usually end in s or es or ies. Verbs following I, you, we, they, or a plural noun will not end in s. The rules for the past tense are a lot simpler. If it's in the past tense and it's a regular verb, it will end in ed, whatever the subject is. But what about irregular verbs in the past tense? Well, these won't follow the pattern of adding ed, but will usually be written the same whether the subject is singular or plural. For example, take the irregular verb to eat. In the past, we would say, I ate, it ate, we ate. Or what about the verb to go? Well, again, in the past tense, we'd say, I went, it went, they went. This is just an example of two irregular verbs. There are many others which you'll need to remember. Finally, there's a really important verb to be aware of that doesn't follow the rules. That is the verb to be. Let's start with the present tense. I am. He is, she is, it is, the dog is. We are, they are, you are, the dogs are. Notice that the verb that matches I is am. It has its own separate version of the verb. Let's check the past tense. I was, he was, she was, it was, the dog was. You were, they were, we were, the dogs were. So this time I is followed by was, which is the same verb form that follows he, she, it, or a singular noun. You may have noticed that you has been crossed out as a singular subject. That's because for the verb to be, we can't say in the present tense, you am. Instead we'd say, you are. And for the past tense, we can't say, you was. Instead we'd say, you were. Saying you was is a common misconception, and it's grammatically incorrect, so it should be avoided at all costs. So verbs will change depending upon the subject that they follow, and whether they're in the past or present tense. Many verbs follow the general rules that we've been exploring in this lesson, but there are some irregular verbs that break the rules, so you'll need to learn these carefully.